All right, so have you ever felt like you're stuck? Like trying to make big changes, but just spinning your wheels?
Yeah, I think that's a struggle a lot of people face.
For sure. But what if I told you the secret is tiny changes, almost like unnoticeable shifts?
Hmm, interesting.
That's what we're talking about today, Atomic Habits.
Ah, I've heard of that.
It's a great book by James Clear, all about how those tiny, like 1% improvements every day, they really add up over time.
Yeah, it's like that saying, right? We overestimate what we can do in a day and underestimate what we can do in a year.
Exactly. It's so easy to get caught up thinking we need some big overhaul to see change. But it's those small, consistent actions, those are what make the real difference.
Definitely. It's like steering a giant ship, a
Right.
tiny adjustment to the rudder. You barely notice it at first,
Right.
but over time, it completely changes where you end up.
Such a good analogy.
Yeah.
So with Atomic Habits, it's not about becoming a whole new person overnight.
Yeah,
It's about those little things you do consistently, like they compound and shape who you become.
exactly. I think that's what's so appealing about this whole concept. It feels manageable.
I agree. It feels less overwhelming than like new year, new me. Right.
Uh-huh, totally.
So how do we actually do this? Where do we even start with making these atomic habits stick?
Well, James Clear gives us a great framework. He calls them the 4 laws of behavior change.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
So it's all about understanding how habits work, how they form,
Right.
and then we can use that to build good habits and break bad ones.
Awesome. So let's break down these laws. What's the first one?
First one is all about making the habit obvious. Like, think about what cues trigger your current habits.
Okay, so like if I want to start a daily writing habit,
Yeah,
I could leave my notebook and pen right on my desk where I can't miss them.
exactly. Or if you're trying to cut back on social media, maybe delete the apps from your phone. Make it less accessible.
Right. It's like you're designing your environment to make the good habits easy and the bad habits harder.
Exactly. You're setting yourself up for success,
Yeah.
taking away those mental hurdles.
I love that. Okay, so what's the second law all about?
The second law is make it attractive.
Okay,
I mean, we're way more likely to do things we enjoy, right?
of course.
So Clear suggests something called temptation bundling. It's pretty clever.
Ooh, I like where this is going.
You basically pair something you need to do with something you want to do.
Oh, I've heard of that. Like, I'll only watch my favorite show while I'm on the treadmill.
There you go. You're basically bribing yourself with something fun.
Exactly. It's like you're hacking your brain's reward system.
You got it. Makes that desired habit way more appealing.
I love that. Okay, so we've got make it obvious, make it attractive. What's the third law?
Third law is make it easy. Basically, you want to reduce friction, make it take as few steps as possible to do the good habit.
Ooh, okay.
One of the best techniques for this is something called the 2-minute rule.
2-minute rule. Tell me more about that.
Okay, so you break down the habit into something super easy, like something you can do in under 2 minutes.
Okay, so instead of saying go for a run, it's put on my running shoes.
Exactly. Because, let's be honest, the hardest part is starting, right?
Oh, for sure.
Once you get going, you build momentum and you're more likely to keep at it.
It's like you're tricking yourself into action.
Nah.
I like it. All right, so we've got obvious, attractive, easy. What's the last law?
Last but not least, we have make it satisfying.
Makes sense.
As humans, we love rewards. It's that little dopamine hit that makes us want to do something again and again.
So how do we make good habits satisfying? Isn't that what we struggle with? Like, eating a salad isn't as fun as a big piece of cake.
True, yeah. That's where habit tracking can really help. When you can actually see your progress, it gives you a sense of accomplishment.
Okay, so like marking off the days on a calendar or an app.
Exactly. It's that little reward that reinforces the cycle.
Speaking of, you mentioned the habit loop earlier. Can you explain a bit more what that is?
Sure, it's basically a cycle. It starts with a cue, something in your environment that triggers it. That cue leads to a craving, a desire for something. Then comes the response, the actual habit you do.
Got it.
And finally, the reward, that satisfaction you get from doing the habit.
Okay, so can you give
Oh.
me an example? Like something from everyday life.
Let's say you hit that afternoon slump, feeling tired and drained.
Ugh, yeah, I know that feeling.
That's your cue.
Yeah.
And your craving is for an energy boost. So what do? You reach for a sugary snack. And the reward, that temporary rush of energy.
Oh man, this is too real.
But the problem is that leads to a crash later, right? And then the cycle starts all over again.
Wow. It's like a light bulb moment. I never really thought of it like that before.
Right. But once you understand how that habit loop works, you can start to take control. You can change the cue, change the craving, change the response, and manipulate that reward.
That's fascinating. So we've got the 4 laws, the habit loop.
Mm.
What else is there?
Well, it gets even deeper than that. Clear dives into the psychology of habit formation. Like, it's not just about mechanics.
Ooh.
It's about our identity, who we believe we are.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. So identity-based habits.
Yes, it's the idea that real lasting change comes from changing our beliefs about ourselves.
Okay.
Like, it's about aligning your actions with the person you want to be.
So instead of saying, I want to write a book,
Mm.
you say, I am a writer.
Exactly. It's a total shift in your mindset.
And that makes those daily actions, like writing for an hour every day, feel more natural.
Right. It's not something you force yourself to do, it's who you are.
I love that. So how can we actually cultivate this identity-based approach? Like, how do we do it?
Clear suggests focusing on that desired identity and asking yourself, what would this kind of person do? What actions would someone with this identity take?
So if I want to be a healthy person, I would ask, what would a healthy person eat?
Right. How would they exercise? How would they manage stress? You start making choices that reinforce that identity.
And as you act in line with that identity, you start to believe it more and more.
Exactly. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
This is so insightful. Okay, we've covered a lot already. We talked about the 4 laws, the habit loop, identity-based habits. There's so much here. We'll have to continue this in part 2 of our deep dive.
Welcome back. So we were talking about building good habits, but, the other side of the coin is breaking those bad habits.
Right, and I think that's where a lot of us really struggle, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's tough. Those bad habits, they're sneaky.
They really are, like they have a magnetic pull or something.
It's because they often operate on a subconscious level. Like, they're so ingrained, almost like an autopilot response.
So how do we break free from that autopilot?
Some people say you just flip the 4 laws. Like, for good habits, we make them obvious, attractive, easy, satisfying.
Right.
So for bad ones, you do the opposite. Make them invisible, unattractive, difficult, unsatisfying.
Makes sense in theory, but I don't know, it seems a bit too simple, right?
Yeah, you're right. Hiding the cookies doesn't mean the craving just disappears. That's why it's important to understand, like, the psychology of it all. We need to figure out what emotional need that bad habit is fulfilling.
Ah, okay, so instead of just trying to suppress the craving,
Yeah.
we need to figure out what's driving it in the first place.
Exactly. What's the underlying need? Is it stress relief? Boredom? Comfort? Once you know what it is, you can find healthier ways to meet that need.
That's such a good point, like addressing the root cause, not just the symptom.
Exactly.
So how do we go about exploring those deeper needs?
Mindfulness can be a really powerful tool for this.
Okay.
It's all about paying attention to the present moment without judgment.
Right.
So when you feel that urge to engage in that bad habit, just pause. Notice the thoughts, the feelings, the sensations.
So instead of just grabbing that bag of chips when I'm stressed, I'd take a moment to think about what I'm feeling.
Exactly. And often you'll find that the craving is linked to a specific emotion. It could be anxiety, loneliness, boredom. And once you're aware of that connection, you can choose a different response.
Okay, so like I'm feeling stressed right now, but instead of eating those chips, I'm going to go for a walk. Something like that.
Exactly. It takes practice. You won't be perfect at it right away. But the more you practice mindfulness, the better you become at recognizing those triggers and choosing a healthier response.
And what about those times when we slip up?
Yeah.
Because, it happens.
It happens to everyone. That's where self-compassion is so important.
Yeah.
Don't beat yourself up. Instead, look at it as a learning opportunity.
So not, ugh, I'm such a failure, I'll never break this habit.
Right. It's more like, okay, I slipped up, but what can I learn from this? What can I do differently next time?
That's a much better way to look at it. Takes the pressure off.
Definitely. So we talked about mindfulness, self-compassion. What other strategies does Clear suggest?
Yeah, are there any other tools we can use?
Well, he also talks about the importance of having a strong why.
Okay, like why do I even want to break this habit?
Exactly. What's your motivation?
So it's not just I want to lose weight. It's I want to be healthy so I can have more energy to play with my kids or something like that.
That's a great example. When you have a strong why, it gives you the fuel to keep going when things get tough.
It's like an extra boost of motivation.
Exactly. And another thing he talks about is focusing on building positive habits, not just eliminating the negative ones.
Okay, I like that. So instead of just saying, I'm going to stop eating junk food, it's more like I'm going to focus on eating more fruits and vegetables.
Exactly. It's about replacing the bad with the good. Because when you focus on building those positive habits, You're creating a new identity for yourself. You're creating a whole new set of behaviors that will naturally crowd out the old ones.
So it's like if you're filling your life with healthy activities, there's less space for those unhealthy ones.
That's the idea. And it's a much more empowering approach, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. It's not about deprivation. It's about creating a life that you love, a life that's filled with habits that support your well-being.
Exactly. We've covered so much in this part. Mindfulness, self-compassion, finding your why, building positive habits. So much good stuff in Atomic Habits.
It really is a great book.
Yeah.
But there's still more to uncover, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Hmm.
In the next part, we'll dive into some of Clear's advanced tactics, like strategies to take your habit game to a whole new level.
Can't wait. We'll be back for part 3 of this deep dive.
All right, welcome back to the deep dive. So we've talked about the 4 laws, the habit loop, identity-based habits, breaking bad habits.
Phew, yeah, we've covered a lot. But I know there's even more to it, right? Like how to really optimize things.
Exactly. James Clear, he gives us a whole bunch of advanced tactics, like ways to level up our habit game.
Perfect. So what's one of these advanced tactics? What can we start with?
One of my favorites is habit shaping.
Okay, what's that?
It's basically breaking down a big goal into smaller, more manageable steps.
Okay, so kind of like that 2-minute rule we talked about, but on a bigger scale.
Exactly. Let's say you want to write a novel.
That feels daunting just thinking about it.
Right. But what if you just focus on writing for 15 minutes each day?
Okay, that sounds a lot less scary.
Right. And those 15 minutes, they add up over time. And as you build momentum, you can gradually increase it. Maybe write for longer or write more often.
So it's about starting small, building slowly, instead of trying to do everything at once.
That's the key. Make it sustainable, you know? You don't want to burn out or get discouraged.
That makes sense. What else does Clear talk about?
Well, there's this idea of implementation intentions.
Okay, where are those?
It's basically getting super specific about when and where you'll do the habit.
Oh, okay. So not just I'm going to exercise more. It's I'm going for a run at 7 a.m. tomorrow in the park.
Exactly. Time, location, the specific activity, you're way more likely to follow through when you're that specific.
It's like you're taking away the decision making. It's already decided, so you can't hesitate or put it off.
Right. And speaking of tracking progress, Clear also talks about visual cues and rewards, like things to keep us motivated.
Yeah, we talked about habit trackers earlier. I'm curious, why are those so effective?
Well, our brains, they love visual cues and rewards. When we see that streak on a calendar or a progress bar filling up, it feels good.
It makes you feel like you're accomplishing something.
Right. It triggers that dopamine, reinforces that habit loop. It's almost like a game.
I like that, gamifying it.
And it's not just about external rewards, though. It's also about that intrinsic motivation, that feeling of satisfaction from the habit itself.
Oh, okay. So how do we get that intrinsic motivation?
You gotta find a way to make the habit itself enjoyable. Like if you're trying to read more, pick books you're actually interested in. If you're trying to exercise more, find an activity you like, whether it's dancing or hiking or whatever.
It's about shifting that mindset from I have to do this to I get to do this. Yeah.
Exactly. And that brings us to another important point, the power of our environment and our social circles.
Yeah, we touched on that earlier. How can we really optimize our surroundings?
Well, you want to make the path of least resistance lead to the good habit. So if you're trying to eat healthy, fill your fridge with healthy food. Get rid of the junk food.
Out of sight, out of mind, right?
And if you want to exercise, make sure your workout clothes are easy to grab. Maybe find a workout buddy to help you stay accountable.
So it's about removing those obstacles, those temptations that can derail us.
Exactly. And being around people who support you, who have similar goals, that can make a huge difference.
It's like having a built-in cheerleading squad.
Because, let's face it, change is hard. It's way easier when you have people to cheer you on, understand what you're going through, and celebrate those wins with you.
This has been such a great deep dive. So many good insights. We covered the 4 laws, the habit loop, identity, breaking bad habits, advanced tactics. I feel like I have a whole new toolkit for building those positive habits.
Me too. Atomic Habits, it's just such a practical book. And you can use these principles for anything, really, from health and fitness to relationships, work, anything.
It's not about perfection. It's about those small, consistent improvements over time. It's about understanding the science behind it all.
And the best part is, Those tiny changes, they can lead to really big results over time.
So as we wrap things up, what's one key takeaway you want our listeners to remember?
That they have the power to shape their lives one habit at a time. Those small actions, they really matter.
So well said. So listeners, take what you've learned and put it into action. Choose one habit you want to work on, start small, stay consistent, don't be afraid to experiment. You got this. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.